Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the major opportunity we now have to organise and push for electoral reform. In fact, we have the opportunity to really push for a huge change in our politics. We've got a government who generally want people to engage with politics, not be divided by it, but lots of people want different things when they talk about change at all. So the way to get the change you want is organise with others of like mind. But what happens when that means putting your shoulder behind a cause alongside someone with whom you share nothing else in common? Since the election results, I think the single most coherent message to come from Reform UK is about the state of first past the post. They are complaining that they won significantly more votes than the Lib Dems, yet the Lib Dems have got 72 MPs and they have only 5. The electoral system needs reform is their refrain. And I've seen a few people who agree that we need electoral reform jumping against Farage as a sort of reaction and his posse on this issue. And there are two major lines I think I've seen taken. The first is, "Oh, Nigel Farage, you want to rerun a referendum, do you, but not another?" Alluding to the fact we had a referendum on electoral reform in 2011, which lost, and the Brexit referendum in 2016, which won. However, I hate to be contrarian. Actually, that's not necessarily true. But I should point out a few things. First of all, I know Farage often says very contradictory things, but he did actually speak in favour of a second referendum on Brexit before we left. I know he did so from the safety of knowing it would not likely happen, but he nonetheless publicly said he'd be fine with a confirmatory referendum and that he believed the Brexit side would win again. So I'm not sure it's true to say that Farage is applying double standards on this particular issue of having a second referendum. Of course, I can't rule out the fact that he argued against and for a second referendum at time. He does that, and I don't listen to everything he says, but I do distinctly remember him saying he was fine with a second referendum at a particular point in 2019. In fact, it's actually the case that not all Brexiteers argued against the second referendum at all. The main arguments against the second referendum were inside the Conservative Party, largely, I suspect, because they just wanted to get Brexit over and done with in the belief that their party could stop splitting over the issue. This thinking, if true, did not quite work out, did it? The second thing I would say is that although the referendum in 2011 was for a change in the electoral system, it was not for proportional representation, which is what most people want. Most people in favour of electoral reform want PR. Sure, there may be an AV aspect to it. In fact, there probably should be. But when it comes to the usual member top-up that PR systems have to ward against craziness, the AV system proposed in 2011 was fundamentally not this. It wasn't a PR system. We have not had a referendum on proportional representation. Suggesting that we did is a bit like saying the referendum on Scottish independence was the same as the one on Brexit, just because they concerned UK sovereignty. They were similar categories, but would have resulted in very different outcomes. But anyway, calls for electoral reform never been louder. We even have voices on the right of politics calling for it now, not just Reform UK either. There are some Conservatives looking at the unprecedented efficiency of Labour's vote and so alarmed they really don't see first past the post as their friend, which all adds up to a very interesting time. One of the major problems with getting electoral reform being discussed is that the vast majority of supporters don't have sway with the media. So it's really hard to have it brought up on a sort of national platform. You take the National Rejoin March, Brexit related, for example, gets no coverage really. But much smaller events, sometimes on the same day, like last year, all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's in the newspapers. But now that some well-connected bandits on the right want it, that may change, which is an uncomfortable prospect for some. Some wonder if they feel comfortable sharing a cause with Nigel Farage, one of the most odious men in politics, as he demonstrated in Parliament yesterday. And yet, my argument would be, you've already sided with him. Did you want to crush the Tories last week? Then you were already on Nigel Farage's side. He's not just explicitly stated he wanted to crush the Tories, he's helped do so. He didn't have the same reasons as us, but the outcome was common purpose. Although Reform UK did not do as much damage to the Tories as some idiot Conservatives are claiming. I'll talk more about that at some point. But Reform UK undeniably cost the Tories seats. Quite a few. I haven't gone over all the results. I will in time. There's no rush. But without Reform UK, the Tories would still have lost, but it would have been more 1997 than worst defeat ever by some distance. Reform UK even used the same tactic as the Green Party, although for a different party. Labour are going to win a landslide, so it's safe to vote Reform UK to send a message. It won't affect the outcome of the election, but it might change the future dynamic of politics. Reform UK were a major player in tactically voting the Conservatives into a disastrous defeat, which was actually really close to being catastrophic for them, had there not been that little surge of undecided Conservative voters holding the nose at the last minute and a surge in Green support when it might otherwise have helped nobble a few more Tories. So we already had a shared platform with him. We were still able to call out every single one of his terrible policies, every single terrible statement he made. We could do that throughout the campaign. We benefited from the fact that for the first post-war election, the right-wing vote was split at the same time as the main progressive parties got their act together. There was a split in 2015 as well, but both Labour and the Lib Dems were woeful at the time. This was the first time the right-wing vote was split in a way they could not afford, and they do not like it. And if that split is still in place when the referendum for electoral reform occurs, all of a sudden, it will not even be clear where the combined forces of the right will fall. All that, campaign money, where's it going to land? Will they back the Tories, who will absolutely want to keep first past the post as the only way to seize full power in the future? Or will some of them break ranks and support PR in the hope that a more extreme right-wing party can make the difference in a future coalition government? And for those who may be concerned about why Farage and Reform UK want PR, that, well, what's good for them is bad for us, I'd be careful reading too much into it. They're millionaire playboys who like watching the world burn. They'd have all been wealthy with or without Brexit. They're not people with detailed plans for the country. They're bored millionaires whose investments are largely running themselves, so they behave like children who pull the wings off flies just because they need something to do. It's not even clear to me that Farage was really happy that Brexit happened. Don't get me wrong, he genuinely despises the EU. It was set up, after all, as a counter to fascism and war in Europe. Oh, he hates it. But how much of his political activity is really genuinely wanting to change things, and how much is the grift? We may learn over the next few years. If he's driven, he will sharpen up his act and work on building up his presence via his parliamentary activities. If he's more about the grift, he will fall foul of the rules for MPs on such things as like financial declarations and spend all his time boozing and whining about witch hunts against him. Yes, they work with others with a more cunning evil side to them, but that doesn't mean they'll get what they want either. The 5 chimps that Reform have just sent to Parliament, I mean, you've got one former miner who can't believe his luck that he gets to carry on making a fortune by his standards for just talking shit, and 4 already very wealthy and privileged people who just want something to do while someone else looks after their investments. Populism wins when established politics lets people down. As long as we ensure we keep the credible politicians focused on delivering for the people, which is not guaranteed, but way easier with a representative parliament, then we have little to fear from populism. Think about the situation. The country is in the worst shape it's been in modern times. And still the Tories and Reform combined only got 38% of the vote. And it seems that a maximum of half the Reform vote was anchored on the right wing. So the rest of it were those who believed Reform's policies on things that actually sound like socialism, better incomes for the poor in society. They were essentially won over by these sort of promises of like raising the income tax threshold and more money for the NHS. So you're realistically talking a vote share of probably about 31% maximum that voted for the regressive policies. Now, in a PR system, that's not getting you a majority. And think about how the rest of the vote broke down. If a coalition had to form based on this year's results, where would the lines be drawn? Reform may have worked in coalition with the Tories, but they would only have 2 out of every 5 seats, not enough to form a government. Who else would work with them? Well, the DUP and the TUV. TUV formally work with them. The DUP and TUV don't really get on. But okay, they're the natural bedfellows. It's not enough to make a difference. No other party would work with them. It would struggle for stability anyway. Lots of Conservative voters hate Reform UK. Lots of Reform voters hate the Conservatives. So there'd be an awful lot. There'd be a whole section of MPs in each party that would not really want to work with each other. Based on these election results, if we had a closely representative seat breakdown, You could get a coalition with Labour, Lib Dems and Greens. Wouldn't be a strong majority, but it would be a majority. The UK is actually a very tolerant society. You know, I will just point out, your view of the UK may be that we just gave a megaphone to the minority of ourselves. But that is our media amplifying one set of views, which our government of the last few years were happy to go along with. They amplified one set of views and suppressed the others. It's a conjuring trick. The country is actually very tolerant. We just don't look it from the outside. But in this period of turmoil, we had the first non-white leader of the Scottish, Welsh and UK Parliament, non-white Home Secretaries, Chancellors, Foreign Secretary. No one went wild. A quick remark about how positive an image it was, despite the otherwise unsuitability of some of those individuals. No one went mad. No one made a big issue about it. There were no explosions. We all took it in our stride, most people not even noticing something that has never happened even once in some European countries, happened multiple times in this country in the last few years. You know, we are tolerant, we are multicultural. Other countries take the piss out of our attitudes to say fusing cultures are food. The French are busy having a civil war over whether to call it a chocolatine or a pain au chocolat. We're slicing it open and putting a sausage in it. We don't have fights about what to call food. We've got like 12 different names for a bread bun. Italians go mad at lasagna and chips. Gordon Ramsay doesn't speak for us. If we want pineapple on our pizza, we're having pineapple on our pizza. No one makes a fuss. We're actually quite laid back as a people. You know, if we like two types of food, you bet your ass we're combining them. Most of us are like that with everything, including people. You know, we're not the image that our media projects or the knuckle draggers that the same media gives the megaphone to. And once we remove the deprivation which feeds populism, you know, we're going to look like a more tolerant society. But in order for the majority to count, we have to be represented. We must be allowed to express our will at the ballot box without resorting to tricks like tactical voting. Now, okay, no system is perfect. Even with PR, there will still be some votes where you cast it and you have a little think about it, but they will be far fewer. And if Reform UK want PR as well, just so they can feel more important, then okay, well, they'll promote it on the telly. That's a useful thing. Don't feel uncomfortable. Even terrible people sometimes want things that benefit the majority. It doesn't stop you calling them out on literally everything else they want to do. We know that they're not motivated for PR to give the majority a say. They're motivated because it will enhance their own personal influence. That's it. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.